Ground zero. Abagada havaza chataya kalamana sachafats karashta. Yehi or. Okay, that's where it all began. According to ground zero, defined in the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, it's the center of or the origin of rapid, intense, or violent activity or change, which is the very beginning, square run. So it's actually a picture of the what some call the theoretical Big Bang. It's also why we're studying this language. When I bumped into this concept of the Hebrew alphabet and reading the scripture in Hebrew instead of English, it was the ground zero of a rapid, intense, and violent activity and change. According to what I think is the absolute real truth. But it's only the absolute real truth if you qualify, credify, give credit to ancient Hebrew as being that very thing created by the Creator before he created anything else, and the tool by which he created the physical universe. So the Aleph, the infinite one, on the other side of the Aleph, who determined by Aleph to make Bet, everything in the cosmos, which ended up being the manifestation in its pinnacle form, the archetype of all creation, Yeshua, the human, the word made flesh, which would be the Hebrew alphabet, the Hebrew 22 letters of Aleph through Tav, in human format. So this can't be a deception of the devil. This is the revelation of the truth of the Creator himself. Soon as you realize that, it's a violent change or a rapid, intense modification of everything you think, believe, hope, expect, wonder about. The long, windy road of life, suddenly, wham, straight Derek path, Yashar Derek. It's a total game changer. So I started off by saying Abagada Havaza Chati or Chataya, two ways to pronounce it, a few different phonetics, but Kalamana Sachafatz Karashta, because that's the phonetic expression of reading the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet as if it was one word. In English, we say A, B, C, D, E. So we give the E vowel sound after each consonant. But in Hebrew, they give the A as the default vowel. So it's A, Ba, Ga, Da, Ha, and so forth, just so you know what we're doing. And then after making that word, according to John 1:1, you go back to Genesis 1, and somehow there was this deep, referred to as Tehom, maybe referred to as Mayim, doesn't tell us when and where and how that was put into place. The word is used tohu vebohu, can mean it's translated formless and void, but it might be referring to the fact that there was, well, it gets into quantum physics a little bit, but quantum meaning the really super small stuff. So here, just real fast, this is what scientists have determined, and some of it's theory and conjecture, but nevertheless, we have objects. I can hit this table, that's an object, but the object isn't solid. It's actually made out of compounds, which are conglomerations of elements, and there's 200 something elements on the periodic table, which themselves are composed of electrons and neutrons, which may include protons, which are made up of quarks, which themselves are composed of wiggling strings, and those wiggling strings are actually a strand of massless information. Now, this is all theory, and some people disagree, but the point is that's kind of where the status of, as I understand, scientists have kind of agreed to disagree about that. But a massless strand of information. Massless. It's not object. It's not anything solid. It's information. And it's wiggling. It's called the string theory. And it's like, why is it wiggling? Well, nobody knows. But somebody was just telling me that they found that not only is the string wiggling, but also they've found that the protons and neutrons in the nucleus of the atoms are kind of vibrating, wiggling. Well, why are they wiggling? Well, maybe because the strings are wiggling. Are the electrons wiggling? They're flying all over the place, can never even be located. But that means they're bumping around because they're propelled by some sort of energy, and whether the energy is a pulse or a wiggle and oscillation, why are they doing that? Well, if that strand of information is the Hebrew alphabet, 22 letters, that's massless. That's a string of information. Why is it wiggling? Well, you go to the next verse in Genesis, and it says, the Ruach of Elohim merechefet al panai hamayim. The spirit of Elohim fluttered like a dove. And Yahuwah, the Elohim of the Creator, started it wiggling, oscillating, fluttering, hovering. That's why the strings are wiggling. That explains string theory to a certain extent. How and why he got them oscillating, I don't know, but that's why light is a wavelength of oscillation. That's why sound waves oscillate. That's why everything's humming and buzzing and fluttering. That's why the universe is built the way it is. Okay. Now I'm going to jump into what's written here, page 1. And remember, we're talking about saying, where do you start the study? Or where do you start even being concerned of the spelling of words, and how do I even start wrapping my mind around this Hebrew stuff? So I'm going to jump right in and say, why does human consciousness exist? What's that got to do with Hebrew? Because this isn't about Hebrew. This is about we're humans and we find ourselves existing on the face of the earth. That's where this all starts. And Yahweh started by creating the 22-letter Hebrew alphabet before he made humans, before he said, let there be light, or it's translated, let there be light. What he said was, Yehi Or. Why? I'm going to suggest it was for the sake of human consciousness. If you take a philosophy class, and some people hate philosophy, and it's like, whatever, I'm not pushing that. But what I'm saying is that they have determined that consciousness cannot be defined. We know we're conscious if we are, or we think we are, but nobody knows how to even define consciousness other than I know when I experience it. So I'm going on to say here, why does human consciousness exist? Consciousness can't even be defined by our great thinkers and scientists. But then I have to ask, why does the universe exist? I just to bring you up to date, I saw a book at the airport the other day that says, why does the world exist? And I looked at it, and this guy's addressing the same matters. Forget the guy's name, but it says that this is like in the top 10 of all the books on in the what was it, the New York whatever. One of the top 10 sellers of books right now is this book, Why Does the World Exist? It's like, hey, this is talking about the same thing. How curious. Why does the universe exist? As vast and endless as it might seem, the entire panorama of the human experience is actually a limited set of possible exercises. So we were talking about being in a soap bubble or trapped in a snow globe. Every possible thing that the human can think, can feel, can imagine, can hope. Ow, oh, hey, that hurt. That was all designed by the Creator. So all possible thoughts are based upon and bounded or limited by the design and the function of the cosmos at large. This is the concept of a fractal model. Considering each individual piece of the whole and those pieces as a sum, and the overall engagement of the pieces in relationship together, interfacing with each other. Well, I'm talking about the 200-something elements of the periodic table. I'm also talking about the letters of the alphabet. I'm also saying that all the people, all the humans that exist right now or that have ever existed in the past or that will exist in the future, if you pull them all together as individual pieces, then all possible thoughts that any human can have or all possible experiences is limited by, is determined by, is bounded by exactly what the creator of the universe designed and how it should function, and that the entire universe as a whole is we'll get into this in a moment, is a macro of the micro fractal expression of your personal, each individual experience. And it's in the Hebrew alphabet because that's what all 22 letters are, facing with each other. It could almost be read like when you add letters together, they form words, and you add words together and they form sentences, and you add sentences together and they form a narrative story. So if you could add more elements or take some elements away, but elements in the periodic table, in the world of chemistry, if you have one electron, it's a certain element. If you have an electron and a proton, or 2 electrons, or 3 electrons, or 4 electrons, and there are different elements. So the elements are simply adding more electrons. So if you add 200 electrons, well, what if you add 300 electrons? Well, maybe there is, we just don't know. But what I'm saying, that's the only difference. But if the creator had made it a little bit different, then the apprehensions and the perceptions of the people who lived in the universe would be completely different, but fit accordingly. So René Descartes said, cogito ergo sum, Latin. I think, therefore I am. In other words, his consciousness was the only proof that he could exist, that he was existing, because you can say, well, I experienced something, but it might have been a dream, so I can't trust my experience. But the fact that I'm thinking, I know I exist. That gets into a whole other world we're not going to get into, but I'm just saying that I myself cogitate. I'm thinking, processing. Ergo, in this case, it means therefore, but like the word ergonomic means the work fit ergonomically to a human's being. And when I say here in midsummer at full production value, what that means is look at nature. Trees in full summer, the leaves are out, the fruit's coming on, and they're manifesting and they're being you might say, the peak of their expression. And then as autumn and winter, they shriek out. It's kind of like a human in midlife. A young person, a baby, they're just growing, developing, learning, becoming, having focus, desires, and all of a sudden at full production value, and then you kind of, gosh, that hurts, I shouldn't do that. Your mind starts to go and you kind of start to wither. So at that full, pictured by the metaphoric midsummer, ergonomically, that's what I'm expressing here. So this phrase captures the notion that humans are designed. Well, that's intelligent design. That's intentional design by the creator to do the task. Now, if we say recognize, to break that down in English, re means to do it again. To do what? Cog. What's cog? Well, cog is an object. It's not a verb, or maybe it is a verb. Now we have to rethink the way we analyze words even in English, or from a Latin base or a Greek base. To cognize. Well, nize is a suffix, means in your act of doing it. So what's a cog? Well, picture a wheel of cogs. This is all metaphor, parables, analogies. Hebrew works this way. English works this way. It's the way humans are designed to think, as metaphors, as pictures. So picture a wheel of cogs. That's like a gear wheel with a sprocket, like on a bicycle. Purpose to fit. You don't have a sprocket all by itself. It's designed to have either the chain go around it or fit to another gear, to mesh. The cogs have to be designed. So person's brain, their mind, their thinking task is gear-like. The human has the ability, because he was created with ability by the creator, to see how it all fits, to determine patterns, to remember, to recognize, to keep track, even when the cogs are very obscure or complex. So we have to have the human experience, but then as first person present tense, like the Aleph, but then pull the perspective as second person or third person, and, well, second person, say, as other than one having the experience, and look at the one having the experience, which is ourselves. But then we have the third person experience of looking at that one, looking at that one. That's the functioning of consciousness. Each cog is like a link in a chain with fellow cogs, both fore and aft, but a cog must also engage a set of teeth on a foreign body, another gear or the chain, meshing perfectly synchronized with all the weight of responsibility to bear the stress load imposed on one individual cog. So here's the point. I'm using what we humans have designed as mechanical tools that work, and then say, because everything's a fractal pattern, I can look at that and say, well, that's kind of the way human consciousness works. And when you have a gear, like in a transmission or inside a clock, a watch, where one cog, one tooth, bears on one other tooth, you can have the entire car, the engine, the load imposed on that one tooth, pushing on that other tooth. And if that cog breaks, boom, you'll blow out the whole gearbox. So each individual cog has to take the burden and the weight and the responsibility of all the stress on it. It needs to be able to handle it. But it was designed that way to do it by the Creator. So the burden on any one cog is that it carries the full function of the mission for which all the cogs collectively are enlisted. Well, I'm talking about the teeth on a gear. I'm talking about human in the human race. I'm talking about every letter of the Hebrew alphabet. I'm talking about every element in the periodic table, or every little piece of the entire universe has to fit together. So in writing this, why am I saying this is ground zero? Why am I saying this is where it starts? Because when Yahuwah, our Elohim, gave Moshe the text of Genesis to write, he starts with the creation of the universe. But before the creation of the universe, as in John 1, he starts with the creation of the alphabet. And this is another way to see the whole thing. That was page 1. Page 2. Human as cog is both to perceive and affect from within the machine. So if you're inside the machine like a gear, and yet is part of the machine, to perceive and effect. So to perceive and affect is to respond to an effect. Two English words spelled with either an A or an E is the first letter. Two different meanings. So one's own self has the impact on the totality of the cosmic machination, the cosmic machine. In other words, if we are just like a one tooth inside the wheel, if that wheel explodes and blows apart the gearbox, each individual human, depending on what he thinks, what he prays, what he believes, what he hopes, might affect the entire universe. There's a little symbol here on the hat that fit together like a puzzle. Something like that. Everything fit together, and you change one little piece, it changes the whole. Schluter, tile setting products, ceramic tile. Anyway, the human experience is the occupation of pondering. Now, okay, I'm making a statement. Now, is that true? Could it be otherwise? Who says that the human experience is to ponder? If you have a mental disorder or physical trauma, you're in a coma, or you haven't been taught, can you still ponder? Well, that's kind of like Descartes saying, I think, I cogitate. The word in Hebrew is Hagah, Hey Gimel Hey, and it means navigate, rudder, helm, steering wheel, to drive intentionally or to respond to the forces of the currents so that you can go with intention. And it's also to spell words, to ponder, to think, to So if that is the intention for why did the Creator put humans in the universe, on the face of the earth, and give them a conscious mind by which to do things, bump into things, wonder about things, wind down the road of their temporal, mortal experience, The act of pondering, now in a sequential order, is to observe. You notice something, you pull it into your mind, into your, you think, consider, evaluate, compare, organize, meditate. Now you have to separate it and put this, and then assess the value, and then respond to that organization, which is do, make, produce, cause, and effect. All that is actually the definition of the word Eric, ayin resh kaf, and the word shemen, shin mem nun. That's why we call it Erictology, because that's what humans are designed to do. Maybe to a great degree, maybe to a lesser degree, it doesn't matter. It's an individual experience of life. But for one to apply personal effort to change the status quo, in other words, Adam was told to tend the garden. He was told to shamar the gan, shamar, watch, keep, guard, filter out the dregs, rake the path, whatever that might look like. But if you say, well, why should Adam have wanted to rake the path? He had to observe and cogitate that if he walked on bare feet, if he walked on a stone or a pine cone, it's like, oh, that hurts. Remove the pine cone from the path. Well, that's a proactive effect that a human has upon nature to change the whole universe. The ripples that he's sent forth, who knows what those were. Or he might say, hey, that's nature. I don't want to mess with that. Leave that pine cone right there. Don't even touch it. That's why we have the Sierra Club and various other agencies in the United States, Environmental Protection Agency, that even if something is hurtful, don't touch it. That's nature, and let it do its nature thing. But Adam was told to have dominion over nature and to push nature around. And it's like, well, gee, now how do we find a balance? Again, it's all this stuff. So we're still dealing with the same issue. So he might choose to, Adam might choose to sustain the present status under assault by other forces pushing to change that status. Other forces of nature, other forces of people, but to search, to quest, which in Hebrew is bet ayin, to bubble up from within, to wonder, to find, to experience, to have this thing called appreciation, to thrill, be in awe, to ride the wind. It's all part of human consciousness. It's the human experience. Human consciousness exists in order to navigate the journey just for the fun of it. Just for the fun of it. So Yahuwah, our Elohim, that we say is the creator of the heavens and the earth, that's what we say. Then we could question that and say, well, how do we know? Is that true? Was it Yeshua? Was it Yahweh? Are they one? Are they the same? Or they get into bigger questions? But apparently he made human beings to have consciousness and then told them, navigate, make your way around, have fun. Have fun. What's fun? Just for the fun of it. The universe exists as the stage for human consciousness. A human's body, material object composed of dust, same as stardust, but so is the human consciousness. Because if you take the 22 letters and project the will of Elohim to create this universe and everything in it, then even, as we said in the beginning, where human consciousness goes is an expression of those same 22 letters, just like physical manifestation is an expression of the 22 letters, just in a different type of dimension. So everything boils down to what exists in the universe, atoms sharing electrons. And whether we think of it as an electron or something that we can't define as electron, quark, wiggling string, does it all go back to just the 22 letters that he sent merachefeting, fluttering, hovering, wiggling over the surface of some depth? The energy or the provocative agent generating the original force. See, somebody might say, God created the heavens and the earth. What does that mean? Who's God? What does it mean to create? What's that? The energy, that's another so-called, for lack of any better English word, or provocative agent generating the original force and or sustaining the operation of all interoperational forces collectively called energy has traditionally been labeled as God or the Spirit or the universe, all for the lack of any more accurate or clearer identification label. So for us to use Hebrew words is assigning a different phonetic to the same concept. I know I've heard people talk about spirit does this and that, or the universe does this or that. They're pulling those words and applying them and say, hey, that's not Christian, but Christian isn't Hebrew. So they're ideas, they're concepts, which are typical to human consciousness. And then humans keep trying to find a better label. Why are we doing that? That was Adam's job. Name the animals, but not just the animals, the trees, the mountains, the rivers, the clouds, name everything. Adam's job is to name everything, including the unseen things that we're only guessing at what's the best word to name. So if it doesn't matter, theoretically, that we lack a more accurate perspective, if it really doesn't matter, then it just doesn't matter. Call them whatever you want. In which case, objectively, really, there would be no reason to even search for one. If it doesn't matter what you call them, then just call them anything. Call him God, call him Hashem, call him Spirit, call him universe, call him it, call him they, call him he, she. Just if it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. If it does matter, yet we don't know, it would behoove us to search. If it really did matter and we don't happen to know presently, then it would be the reason. It would behoove us to search for it. Is it even possible to find it? If we should perchance find it, what we're searching for, the fact that it matters, what is it that matters, how do we make use of what matters, the value of what it is we find when we're looking, once we found what we're looking for, though we don't even know what we're looking for, it has to be figured to be self-determined by the find itself, being imperceptible from the present vantage point. In other words, if right now I don't even know what I'm looking for, then I don't know the value of what it is once I find it. But when I find it, it should present itself to me as the reason why it's so valuable. That's what I'm saying. In other words, it would be impossible to project a description of worth to us from the state of our present ignorance and darkness. If I'm presently in the lockdown consciousness of the 2,730-year curse, and if that curse, according to Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 and various other places throughout Scripture, including the book of Hosea, and it's all over, if the curse was that we'd be ignorant because of our apathy, I don't know and I don't care. Okay, fine, that's your curse. You won't know and you won't care. Well, then what's it worth? You don't know, you don't care, so don't worry what it's worth. But when you find it, it's like, oh, I didn't even know this was there and I didn't know it was so valuable, but now I see it and he's given me a sense of appreciation. It's like, wow, this is incredible. Such as this study of the Paleo-Hebrew. Such as the concept of perceiving the significance of the Moedim and the Sabbath day and the name of Yahuwah and who is this Yeshua Mashiach. You don't know, and if it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. But if you don't know and it does matter and you're under the confines of the ignorance and obfuscation, the obscurity of the curse, then to break out of the curse and finally behold it is incredible. What would it matter, for example, if someone were to find the proverbial Holy Grail? That's the chalice that Yeshua supposedly drank from and offered for his disciples to drink at the Last Supper. Gospel story, the movie and the book by Dan Brown of Da Vinci Code was about that. And so what they were able to find, hey, look, I got the Holy Grail. What if you could drink out of the Holy Grail? What would you expect to find or get from that? And that other story, the legendary Excalibur, pulling the sword out of the stone. Well, that comes from literally from the Middle Ages, but that was a copy, a reiteration of the story in the book of Jasher of Moshe pulling this stick out of the ground that was growing in Jethro, his father-in-law's garden, that he supposedly got from, it was growing in, that Adam had used in the garden. Goes all the way back before the flood to Adam in the Garden of Eden. That's the story. Who knows if it's true? But so Excalibur, the sword and the stone, there's another study about that. But That's just like pulling the meaning of these words that have been locked up for all these thousands of years that nobody knew. Nobody knows the use of the sword until they pulled the sword out and started using it. The meaning of the word Excalibur comes from a French word that means voracious eater. Well, it's a battle weapon. It chewed up the carnage of the enemy soldier's flesh. But us pulling these words out of being locked up in this petrification stone of, what stone? Aben. Aleph Bet Nun is one word for stone. That's like the voice from heaven when Yeshua was being mikvah, baptized, and this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. Beloved son in whom I am well pleased. Yeshua said, I only do what I see my Father doing. I only say what I hear my Father saying. So a good son doing the Father's will literally is the meaning that can be read into the word Aleph Bet Nun, Eben, stone, just like Caleb means all heart. It's just Hebrew structure and syntax, and it's part of the study. So to pull Excalibur out of the stone is like pulling the meaning of these words out of the fact that we weren't good children to our Father. We weren't doing his will. Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 28, go read those. But what's the yield, hypothetically, because we don't know, we're just all thinking, pondering, cogitating about all this. How could a normal human being possibly benefit as if from some beyond normal resource? Remember, we're talking about the Holy Grail now, and it's just like, hey, what if you took a drink out of the Holy Grail? Well, I don't know. It's all imagination. It's fairy tale stories. Or is it? It's page 2. What might we get from drinking out of the Holy Grail? If health, wealth, power, wisdom? I can identify health, wealth, and wisdom, but what is power? Strength, influence, control over others, control over nature, control over spiritual beings. Is power the ability to make one's voice heard on high? If you could have any power in the universe to leverage exercising your will over another person, over nature, over finances, how about if you had the power to have the real power, the Elohim on high, to actually hear your voice and regard it? Gosh, that must be the greatest superpower, at least in my imagination, better than running real fast or jumping over high buildings, locked onto the face of the earth. I mean, gosh, to make your voice heard on high, what a power that would be. Could power be the amassing of treasure? Money, like King Midas touched, the stories about that. What is treasure? Is treasure the claiming of lands or vessels to which to attach your name? Is sanity a treasure? Clear, rational thinking. Is it a treasure to be unthreatened by an adversary? Is existence itself a treasure? Life. Just having the opportunity to navigate the cosmos for a while. If sanity was a standard, or if sanity was a treasure, to what standard is sanity to be measured? I mean, how do you know the difference between sane or insane, rational or irrational? He's plumb crazy, I tell you. Oh no, this guy's brilliant, creative mind. Who's to say? Is there a standard to which sanity can be measured? What is sanity? What is consciousness? What's a flow of thought? What series or flow of thoughts? If I say this and then that, and it goes to that, and that, like a mathematical equation, might one consider it to be rational and somebody else say, no, it's irrational? But who's to say? By what foundational bedrock is logic and reason and beauty and propriety actually built upon? What fractal pattern of all creation establishes the beat, the norm, the mode, the pulse of righteousness? And anything aside from that could be regarded as syncopation, which is offbeat, or a derivative, or a harmonic distortion, which could be appreciated and as such be disdained as he's crazy. That's not the norm. That is the root of all things equal to the sum of all things. I'm playing off the Hebrew word rash. The root, the basis, the foundation, the top, the pinnacle, the ultimate achievement is the word resh aleph shin. The foundation and the pinnacle is the same. But here I'm talking about is the root. Well, if at the root is the Hebrew alphabet, the foundation of the building of all things, and if the sum of all things, all possible human thoughts, all possible human experiences, all possible human expressions and emotions, and all possible objects made by all possible elements, whether we've discovered them or not, whether we know of them, whether we can imagine them, all the demons, all the angels, all the everything in the mind of the Elohim, if that's the all, and if the sum of all is equal to the root of what's in this alphabet, is it possible they're the same? That's the fractal extremes, the minimal, the DNA code, and the maximum expression in all its permutations. Could it be that there's a minimal spore as a seed containing information like DNA, as an example, like a nucleus, another example, containing all that is minimally necessary to manifest the production of the entirety of creation, both seen and unseen, both determinable and indeterminable, the universe, the cosmos of matter. The cosmos of matter is a spread array, a spectral expression, is the minimal spore at maxi mode, allowed to permutate the order with various combinations, such as, here you have a prism, white light going into the prism, and the prism then facilitates the spreading out into a spectrum so that the white light, which contains all the wavelengths, to be isolating the wavelengths so that you can appreciate every color of light. So what if all that exists in the macro is an expression as a spectrum, a division by micro measures of all that was contained in that original flash of white light? But there also, by what source or via what agent, at whose construct was that flash? In other words, if there's a Big Bang, okay, great, all the universe started with a Big Bang, but who made the Big Bang happen? Where did it come from? Where did the elements that made the Big Bang happen ever arrive or derive from? By what source, by what agent, or at whose construct was that flash? Similarly, now I tried to describe something in a physical sense. If you have a light or you have an object that there was a minimum spore, like one little dot, and it goes through the prism and whoo, you've got the entire universe. What if you could do the same thing with time? Just thinking. If time could be spectrally divided, like the rainbow, into micro measures, eras, eons, years, days, months, seconds, minutes, microseconds. If time could be spectrally divided into microwave measures for the sake of observation and analysis and experience, could the all of time be equal to the instantaneous flash burst from a different perspective of gauge measurement? So in other words, what I'm saying is, if you could take a pure white light in a flash, boom, and then say, oh, out of it came the entire universe inside the snow globe or the smoke bubble by which we can perceive the whole thing and in all its possible expression, permutation, variegation. What if you could do the same thing with time, such that past, present, future, all exist in a moment, a speck of, call it the flash burst? Can you reduce expanse down to the minimal? Page 3. The essence, the elements which compose the expression manifest as the flash burst must be the string of components in sequence order, reckoned as individuals with capacity, which in totality is the singularity. Been saying the same thing over and over here. The only existence which exists, even if it's spread out, is the same as the individual micro. Anything outside that envelope is by definition not defined as existing. So people say, does God exist? No, only existing is inside this. So existence is from Aleph through Tav. Anything on the other side of Aleph, which we can't know and perceive because it wasn't given to us, doesn't exist. So God doesn't exist. But the word Yahuwah and Ehyeh both mean he's the one who causes it to exist. He or it causes existence. Imagined, created, sustains, and manifests existence. That's the Hebrew words with Hayes, Yods, and Vavs. Maybe Aleph, maybe Tav. So the source realm on the other side of Aleph, the source realm, the thing that caused, the one who caused the energy, the one that causes this stuff in this universe, this bet to exist, could be called or simply be implied or inferred as, here's a quote, that place where the plans for this place were determined and mechanized so as to produce this as it was intended by the agent of that place, so endowed with capacity to do so by whoever it was that contains all such power as is necessary to accomplish such things. I'll say it again. That the source realm of all that exists can be implied or inferred as, this is human consciousness at work, that place where the plans for this place were determined and mechanized so as to produce it as intended by the agent of that place, so endowed with capacity to do so, by whoever it was that contains all such power as is necessary to accomplish such things. The concept of that source realm is simply reduced to the expression Aleph. The concept of this place in material existence, even if it includes things which cannot be labeled as matter, immaterial things like ideas and thoughts, human consciousness, but also is the concept of what a concept, the very idea that a concept can exist, what we call bet. So bet isn't just the object, isn't just the universe, but it's every thought, every fact that there's even such a thing as a concept is what was created by some agent empowered to do so from whatever source realm of all such things on the other side of the Aleph that we can't even imagine because our imagine is contained in this confinement. To consider what the Aleph is, let me see if I can imagine what God is, what the Creator is, what the Father is. To imagine what Aleph is even is to put Aleph into bet form, because Aleph itself is beyond bet. Aleph is unfathomable. Aleph is the other side of the bet, and as such can't be defined by the parameters of determination, which is in the bet zone. To organize and evaluate what bet is, to observe what bet is, that it's not Aleph, but emerged from Aleph. But to emerge is now an action, which makes it Gimel. Gimel is to notice a distinction, a difference, a spectral variance, or the concept that bet should exist as an array, like the spread of colors or the expanse of time. Even though it's in bet, it's not bet, it's Gimel. The difference that Gimel identifies is Dalet. The fact that Dalet is identifiable is Hey. The Dalet of everything is the variegation, the distinction, the spectrum delineation, choice. The Dalets are the options, the doors of possibilities. Every or each ultra minute discrepancy, one electron different, boom, it's a different element. One slightest variation of wavelength is a different color, a different note, a different everything. The slightest variation, ultra-minute discrepancy in the wavelength of a light wave or a sound wave will be received as a different color, a different sound. Ad infinitum, unto infinity, or without limit as to the scale or range of all possibilities. The flash burst of something, which may some call the Big Bang event, is Aleph allowing or causing bet to exist in the temporal material realm of existence, such as it may be perceived. But then also a perceiver, a perceptor was needed and was thus made to do that very act. The fact that something is composed of distinguishable and identifiable variegations at either a micro or macro scale is its Dalitness. Now, somebody can say, hey, where do you get all this stuff? And it's like, I'm just analyzing the concepts of the Hebrew letters, interfacing with physics, science, and human consciousness, and just messing around with thinking. And if someone says, hey, where'd you get this stuff from? I'm just thinking. I don't know that there's any book. Maybe some other people have thought these thoughts. I don't know, but I'm trying to express what science has told us what is compared to what the alphabet in Hebrew appears to say. And if you don't like this, you can go watch something on TV. Go ahead. It's okay. If we need to take a break so you can go do that, we're at 1:29. Let me just go a little bit more and then we can take a break if you want or see what you guys have to think. To designate the difference between Dalit options, to identify, to designate, this is this is that, this is this wavelength, that's this wavelength, this is this color, that's this color, that's all hay. So to discern the difference similarly between the kadosh and the halal, between the sacred and the profane, is also hay. To determine or declare that one thing in creation is clean and another thing is unclean is hay. Hay could only be accurately classified by the authoritative insight of Alephness. That's where it came from. Only Aleph knows. I mean, the creation doesn't know, it just is. But Aleph can say, hey, I made it such that, hey, look, this is clean, that's unclean. So with the insight of Alephness, because the perceptible receptacle, the human being, that's Vav, the perceptor, the Vav man, Wa, can consider the hay of Dalit as insight or inside information or esoteric knowledge. Wa is an extension of hay. Hay is the feminine suffix. Wa is the masculine suffix. Man was birthed out of woman, a manifest of the flash of singular projection into 15 billion fractional versions of humanity. And I say that because they say there's about 8 billion people living on the face of the earth, and there's typically, what some have calculated, right or wrong, that about the same number of people who exist present tense is the sum total of all who's ever existed on the face of the earth. So that throws it, say, somewhere around 15 billion human options or fractional versions of humanity. And such that, as we said before, if you conglomerate all the possible human experiences together, they're simply manifest as a spectrum of what was contained in the Hebrew alphabet. That's the end of page 4. So Wa, shaped like this, shaped like a goblet with a stem, the Holy Grail, as it were, is a goblet of mixing. Like honeybees seeking pollen from flower to flower, blending, choosing, just finding something to be busy about, a little bit here, a little bit there, going around and whatever. One version of Vav is even drawn as the goblet icon, a collector, which is why I use that. And then Zion, stop. No more flittering about. All options narrow down to just one. Dead or alive. Choose. Wa must choose, life or death. Deuteronomy 6, Moshe said, I put before you blessing or cursing, life or death. I suggest you choose life. Your choice. You must choose life or death. A default non-action is to go to death. You need to choose life. All of human experience as individuals, or the sum of all individuals, is a more microed expression of the one original fractal hologram, sort of like a modern computer screen, which can register or portray a million color variations. It's all a function of only 3 primary colors. Each human pathos is a fractional expression of the fractal macro in micro form. Who is Yeshua? Yahushua? the Word made flesh. He's the quintessential fractal flash burst of information, the Hebrew alphabet, manifest as light, sound, igniting human consciousness in a human body, having human experience and expression. Light and sound are both an expression of the identical energy, a wavelength, 40,000 hertz differences from what I was told, from what I understand. Sound is the same thing as light, only 40,000 times slower. Light is faster. Or the frequency variance, or calculated as oscillation, warbles, or over time. All matter is a compilation of frequency expressions, which, when assuming a certain mass, become noticeable and are differentiated from other expressions and are subsequently identified by Adam, given a name by some human. The concept of identification is the Hebrew word Shem, meaning name, fame, renown, reputation, place. To be identified with a Shem is to have a characteristic which can be distinguished as different from others. Distinguished is to be given a name different from another name because of some aspect of distinction. So Adam at large has named the one primal source, which was the pure and totality of being and expression, as simply the Shem, Hashem, the name, as if by doing so, declaring it to be the name above all names. The Adam not having any, or not knowing of any better classification than to simply say, the name. How does one get first person inside the box having experience, outside the box, second person looking at the box, third person knowing that that's even going on? How does one get outside the box, trapped in the snow globe or the soap bubble, inside the universe, to identify the character and location of the box itself? How big is the universe? How does dimensions of reality work? Considering the box to be infinitely large and of no nature by which to compare it or measure it, other than by itself, we're trapped in this universe in its presumed hypothetical totality by which Adam can imagine. Adam's consciousness and brain is trapped inside the box. It's interesting to note that the box itself, as its own essence is expressed, or as it radiates its ownness, is a version of the expression of the same singularity that every object in the box expresses or experiences, and is limited in scope to the way the same parameters of limit imposed upon every other element which composes the box and its contents. Okay, with all this sameness going on, what factor provides scrutiny so as to be able to be labeled kadosh, translated holy, which actually means distinction, separateness, completely different than any other, typically translated holy, but also means betrothed. Different from any other, betrothed. The priest had Kadosh Yahweh written on their headband. Different than any other man, betrothed. Israel is different than any other people group. You, if you're betrothed, if you're Kadosh Yahweh, you're not like any other human being or a standard human being. You're kadosh, you're not common. The meaning of the letter Zion. And only because Aleph said so. Because Aleph designed it to be so and designated accordingly by saying, hey. Wa, the sixth letter, is designed to contain hey, the inside of the information, with the Zion of discrimination as a tool of assessment. Chet, on the other side of Zion, is a picture of the inverse of Aleph on the other side of Bet. So here we've established that Bet is a material universe, and whatever Aleph is the one responsible for Bet existing. So too, if Zion is this letter that means to distinguish or to cut off as a limit, then there's Chet, it's a fence, it's an obscurity to those on this side of the Zion. You don't know what's on the other side of Chet, just like we don't know what's on the other side of Bet. So it's this inverse, a picture of the inverse of Aleph on the other side of Bet, hidden from view until you get there, in a different dimension of reality. Chet can be a picture of the grave. What's the experience of human consciousness when you go through the veil of death? Well, some people have near-death experiences, but can we trust them? I don't know. It's a whole different thing. The point is, Aleph is silent, unpronounceable. Aleph is typically referenced by the phonetic sound eh, and by default in necessity or convenience. So you say et Aleph Tav, but if Aleph is silent, you should just say that's the T sound. But what about the Aleph? So we say et. Aleph is silent. It's not eh, but it's called eh. For convenience, by necessity, Aleph is expressed because it's silent and invisible and is reference of the imperceptible, but it's accessible as the other 21 letters of the alphabet in Hebrew. Chet is a blockade, a wall, fence, prison, castle, treasure box. It's the answer, but Chet is only accessible by the Vav man who Zions. Does it mean die? But the letter 7, Shavah, which is the seventh letter Zion, can also mean to swear, or take a vow, take an oath, put to the weapon, cut off, Zion. The man who will swear the vow under oath is doomed to the curse if the vow is reneged upon. So the human who will choose life in lieu of death as a volitional, proactive choice, consciously and intentionally informed consent, and then perform a sign of proof, baptism, something like that. The other side of Chet is a fantasy world with a different analysis of the cosmos, of what and why and how and who, which folks on the outside, which is on the other side of Zion, the outside of the Chet, can't even fathom, and it's nothing more than foolishness. So we have in the New Testament talks about those who are not saved, those who don't believe. To them, those who do believe are fools. If Chet represents the answer, then does Zion infer the question? And if so, what question? Now, that's near the end of page 6, not even quite halfway through. But I'm going to pause here and say, does anybody have anything they want to say or comment, or just take a breath?
I think just what this made me think of, just the importance of studying the words, and just as a man thinketh, so is he, and understanding, who Yahusha is, as far as he's the Son, right? The spitting image, and it's hard to tell the Father from the Son apart. But when you really, are we to believe our Greek captors, the Platonic philosophies, that the Spirit left its habitation to come down and impregnate a woman, to die, to resurrect himself, to sit by his own right hand? I don't think that's what the Hebrew is saying. It's the words that we speak, the words that we hear, the faith that comes by hearing. And by that word, that Spirit, we are born again. We become the Word in the flesh ourselves. We are written epistles, right? We are the manifestation of the words of Yahuwah, which is an expression of himself. So whenever we read and study and ponder and cognate those words, we are becoming like him. We are becoming anointed with the oil. We are the Elohim. Have you not heard that ye are Elohim, right? And so in finding who the Mashiach is, we find who we are. And through these words, we have the expression of the Father and the Son, manifesting that into this physical realm that we are in. That's what made me think of.
Eric, I'm loving this. I'm tracking, and it's awesome. And I studied out Deuteronomy 5:1 over the course of the last many hours. And as you're teaching and doing and talking about all this stuff, there are places in this scripture that I studied out that are popping up. It's like aligning with that verse. And at the same time, I'm just elated and so ecstatically grateful and amazed and this is paleo that I'm tracking with this. So I'm loving it. It's awesome. That's my big comment.
Thank you. Anybody else have a perspective that they want to? You could disagree if you want either also, but I'm just saying this, open it up to the.
And may I also add that this is also a great example for us, and even more of a reason to ponder each and every letter of the alphabet, because of what you're talking about and expanding on is a product and a benefit of us pondering the letters, pondering them, and as they're written in Torah. And also, just so I can add that scripture, Deuteronomy 5:1, Devarim, is the scripture as it is in the Tanakh in English. Moshe called all of Israel and said to them, "Hear, O Israel, Shema, the decrees and the ordinances that I speak in your ears today, learn them and be careful to perform them." That's the verse. And like I said, as you're articulating and expanding on all this wonder, this paleo, there's places in this verse that I studied out that are highlighting that you're expanding on. It's amazing. So, hallelujah.
Well, just so you know, you're talking about contemplating each one of the letters. I just ran through the first 7 letters because 7 Shavah is a group. Zion is the 7th letter. It means to cut off, Het is fence. So there's this containment of the first 7 letters. But this is right near the end of page 6, and what we're going to get into next is a way of reading all the letters in their sequence order. So that's what's coming up. Did any of the rest of you want to make any comments?
Yeah, actually, as you were sharing this, Eric, there's this scripture that kept coming back to my mind in the book of Colossians, chapter 1, verse 16. It says, because just before I read the text, I want to make sure we do more and more understand that Yeshua was the incarnated Aleph Bet. He was the Word made flesh. So as we know this, when we read any time in the New Testament that we read about him, we should look up to the Word, because he's always pointing to the Word. He's the Aleph Bet. So here, verse 16, it says, "For all things in heaven and on earth were created by him. All things were, whether visible or invisible, whether thrones or domination, whether principalities or power, all things were created through him and for him. He himself is before all things, and all things are held together in him." I truly believe this is the Aleph Bet because he came into flesh, and the scripture is talking about him.
And all that you just read is basically what this is talking about. I'm just trying to elaborate it in a little different verbiage.
That's very good. Yeah, and if I might add, the second scripture that come to mind then would be Ephesians also chapter 1, and that would be the verse 18, also always focusing on Yeshua being the Word. Paul here is doing this prayer, and he say, "I pray to God," verse 17, of our I pray to Yahweh, okay, of our Yeshua, the Father of glory, may give you spiritual wisdom and reveal in your growing knowledge of him. This is really what you're doing as you're sharing this. "Since the eyes of our heart have been enlightened, so that you may know what is the hope of his calling, what is the wealth of his glorious inheritance in the saints." And I truly believe we see this in the Aleph Bet also. The hope of his glory. That's the Tzadik Kufreshin Tav. That's what's coming.
Yeah, so you can say that because you've pondered, contemplated, you've Haggad the last 4 letters. You know where this is headed. Mm-hmm. And so this Aleph Bet is a map, treasure map. That's a whole other thing we can do one day, is to talk about the treasure map, one of these talks if you want to. But if you can read, so when I was talking about time as the Big Bang, or if we look at the expanse of all past, present, and future, it could be sucked back into this one moment of this flash. And if it all boils down to saying, well, no, that's all in the Hebrew alphabet, then we can expand the dot of reality into the Hebrew alphabet and read it as the course of human history, an individual narrative of life, or even the expanse of all reality, or the life of Yeshua, or the life of Israel, the nation at large. I mean, this is all this expression of why we can say, let's look at the Hebrew alphabet as the map of eschatology, which makes it the map of the book of Revelation, which means if we look at Pei Zadi as this mouth opens, oh, that's Yeshua and blossoming, flourishing. That's Yeshua jumping out of the grave, resurrected. That's Israel coming back out of the dispersion as the nation that was always supposed to be. That's a picture of us resurrecting, following Yeshua, running through this obstacle course of death. This is a picture of Yahweh's plan for the whole entire reason for the creation, which is why does humans exist on the face of the earth in the midst of this cosmos, whatever it looks like, whatever shape it is, doesn't matter. This is the plan. So when you realize that, I said, everything we've been talking about this last hour and a half boils down to saying, oh, it's scripted by these 22 letters. That's another way to read the alphabet.
I would add up here also 1 Corinthians 15 related to what you just said, and I always see the caterpillar becoming this beautiful butterfly. That's the hope that we have. And here it says, verse 20, but now Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. And we know the feast of Yahweh, therefore we can understand what's coming. So as he was risen, so we shall be, and that's the tzaddik coming for us. That's the hope, I believe, that is in front of us.
So just as a little explanation, I mentioned at the beginning that today, according to some calendar, is the day of Shavuot, the 50th day of counting, which the gematria value of noon is 50. Hebrew is laid out in base 10, so you've got Aleph through Yod, 1 through 10, then Kaf would be 20, Lamed 30, Mem 40, Nun 50, Samik is 60, Ayin 70, Pei 80, Zadi 90, but yet for Yeshua to burst out of the grave as the Zadi, well, that's a picture of Shavuot, that's a picture of the butterfly coming out of the chrysalis, but so is Nun. So the thing is here, these are concentric circles, gears fit in together, and there's at least 3 or 4, if not 22 different ways to read these moving gear wheels, and to say there's overlapping systems that only when they all line up, it's kind of like the calendar, you got the sun, the moon, the stars, the constellation, the on and on and on and on. And it's a complex code, it's a cipher. And like a combination lock, only when certain tumblers line up does the thing open. So to synchronize the Moedim with these different systems, you got 1 through 7 outside, like 7 days, but then through the Zadi also synchronizes to the 7 days, but it's actually 11 letters. And then it's like, whoa, it's enough to be confusing, but it's a secret code. If it wasn't secret, it wouldn't be secret. So some could say, phooey, I've had enough of all this stuff. Well, go ahead. We're just messing around.
We need a place to stop.
And a place to stop. Okay, what we're going to get into next is on the gate of the Chet is 4 colors of embroidery. And that's what we're going to talk about right after the break here.